Better her than me. A cowardly but natural thought, but mostly cowardly, Raph believed, when he compared his own position to the one of the irken who was suffering beneath his gaze. Invaders are always in action, risking their lives as they cross the universe, battle and outsmart enemies, and completely take control over enemy planets with only the help of their Sur units. Meanwhile, Raph was a simple medical drone. It was a job that normally required little to no effort. The body of an irken can easily deal with injuries that would be major or fatal for inferior species. The most deadly situation would be if the most vital and vulnerable part of the irken, the pack, was lost or destroyed. After a millennia and a half of evolution, the irken body became so dependent on the pack that it now fails to not only function but survive without it. The pack is the irken's life support. It serves as a second brain but with artificial intelligence. It has the appropriate mechanisms and nutrients, and it automatically takes complete control if the irken's life is being threatened while they are stunned or clinically dead. And though injuries in general are still painful, irkens survive and recover quickly, in rare cases in a matter of moments. But usually it takes roughly a day for a wound to fully heal. It depends on the severity of the irken's condition. A shattered bone takes longer than a day to mend itself, but not too far longer. Cases like that are only critical if the irken is in harm's way, and or if the irken is not wise or tolerant enough to stay completely still in order for the bones to properly reassemble. Otherwise, not even a broken skeleton technically requires attention. Irken bodies were as strong and independent as the irkens themselves. That was why Raph chose this job. He knew he would most likely be paid to stand around the massive. Another reason being, he truly did have the appropriate skills. Irken biology was one of the countless things downloaded into an irken's pack at birth. But just because of that first reason, not a lot of irkens were keen on being re-encoded as medical drones. They were frowned upon. They were considered lazy, worse than a service drone almost, and the tallest treated service drones badly enough already. The tallest hardly acknowledged Raph and the other very few medical drones, however. Raph was apathetic about the tallest's opinion of him anyway, like he was with everything else. Miyuki. Only her opinion mattered. Only she motivated him. Red, Purple, and Spork lacked the unique and majestic qualities she had. She openly embraced her superiority like them, but with dignity. Raph used to be enthusiastic, especially over becoming an invader. He trained for it, but after the death of Almighty Tallest Miyuki, his personal favorite leader in his lifetime, he felt very numb. A fellow comrade encouraged Raph to avoid giving up. This same irken's life was now partly in his hands, he had yet to realize, and partly in the claws of the control brains. This irken's pack was practically destroyed. Not impaled or crushed, the damage was internal, and quite obviously by the way the irken was responding when she was brought in, unfathomably painful. Raph had been curious about the one voice that would not stop screaming somewhere in the ship. He himself was still recovering from the effects of what he now knew was a florpus hole, but the pain had subsided. This irken was definitely still hurting in some way. Raph wasn't certain of whether the trauma was physical or mental until the screaming and groaning got closer. Until the owner of the screams was hastily dragged in the same room he was told to report in. The screams were reduced to weak, pitiful moans as soon as Raph saw the irken for himself. The uniform indicated that she was an invader. Her pack was the problem. Every moment, it brought her an electrical bodily surge. But instead of reactivating like it repeatedly said, it was torturing this invader. Even without any bloodshed, the sight of her was still disturbing. Every violent shock stunned her more, yet she still twitched, drooling and frothing at the mouth. By the two soldiers handling her, she was thrown in, not carelessly, but in a panic, as to avoid further electrocution. Raph's first immediate instinct was to remove the pack. Of all things, The Invader may have been safer having it off, but not for over 10 minutes, of course. Raph waited for one of the surges to cease, but the control brain hovering behind the scene did not. It reacted quickly, plunging thick wired cables into every opening of the pack. Then, with a forceful, final burst of electricity, the control brain manually shut it down. The Invader lay on her side, still convulsing. Raph drew close, lowering down to one hand and one knee.
Whatever just happened to this ship? The Florpus, that's what caused this, right? What happened to you that was different? What happened?
He realized quickly that the Invader was senseless, not conscious enough to comprehend what he inquired. The Invader jerked again, this time with a quiet, sickening gurgle as more saliva spurted freely from the corner of her mouth. Raph looked up.
How did you get it to stop?
He asked, almost expecting the control brain to tell him it was putting the Invader out of her misery.
Stabilization,
it replied,
assisting the pack to temporarily power down and reboot properly.
Raph pointed at a clean, isolated metal counter in the center of the room.
Could you move her to the recovery table thing?
The control brain obliged, carrying the Invader by her pack with the wires still plugged in. That was when Raph thought, when he took a closer look, better her than me. 6 minutes passed. It was silent. In one small quantity at a time, the control brain fed the Invader back her energy and lifeline. Raph, meanwhile, had out what was known as an IMD, Irken Medical Disc. It was an ancient thing almost, but still provided what it was asked of. Like an Irken's pack or a reunites head, it was small, but had many bigger things compressed inside. Raph's IMD hovered and buzzed softly as it operated what was brought out. Almost casually, Raph kept a breathing mask pressed over the familiar face. Very familiar. Raph thought nothing of it. He saw hundreds of Irkens that looked the same. He himself looked rather similar to Almighty Tallest Red, but much shorter, of course, and with a different shade of red in his eyes. Even though the IMD was hardly needed, it was still indeed useful. It could have been more useful with a few upgrades. For starters, Raph thought, the breathing mask could have been transparent instead of black, so the face inside could be seen. It couldn't be, with the mask cupped over it completely. The edges even reached the base of the antennae, pinning them down. Raph believed the size would be appropriate enough if it wasn't for this. It looked uncomfortable. Raph watched over the Invader, waiting patiently for results. The pack blinked red as it began to compute and maintain its host's vital signs until they behaved normally on their own again. This usually happens after the pack reactivates, but the control brain disabled it from doing so automatically. The Invader had a palpitating heart, and her breathing was irregular and almost too shallow. But thankfully, these crucial signs of life hadn't ceased altogether, and it didn't require much to revive her. She jerked again and made a noise, a faint, congested cough. That was right before she suddenly broke into a fit of stronger coughing, having been choking slightly on her own saliva. Raph had kept her on her side, aware of this. Her breathing was heavier, though more steady, as her heartbeat now was. The blinking in her back stopped. Raph slowly removed the mask from the Invader, who had her eyes halfway open. They were too pale. The color must have been rare. Raph hadn't seen a gray-eyed Irken before. Quickly, he considered the possibility that the Invader was not born with the color. It was a strange side effect from her trauma. Raph would find out in a moment.
How bad is it?
The Invader slurred, just audibly enough, as the eye Raph could see dizzily tried to focus on him. Raph's own eyes blinked in recognition. The voice was much more familiar now that it wasn't so terribly riddled with pain.
Oh, sis. Hold on, is that you?
The gray eye glared weakly in confusion.
Never mind,
Raph said, reminding himself why he was seeing Sis again in the first place.
You were in rough shape, but I think you're back to normal for the most part. The control brain is just, adjusting your pack. Try not to move. Can you see?
We don't have sisters. Sis muttered deliriously.
I'm sorry?
I'm not your... I can't be... Oh. Wait. Something's wrong. Just take a minute. You're still... It's like a chunk of me is missing. I feel too different. I'm thinking different. Differently. You. How do I know you? We trained together, sis. We were often partners.
It's me, Raph.
Sis slowly sat up, still visibly confused. She shook her head and stared off into space. I don't remember that. I don't know you. To Raph's surprise, this actually hurt to hear.
Okay, do you remember what happened up there just now? Your pack was going haywire. It eventually made you pass out.
Sis blinked one eye shut. Damn it. I think I lost something. I lost something. Something happened that shouldn't have.
The control brains say it was a Florpus hole that happened.
Raph said. Florpus. It was. Sis's eyes rounded hugely. It was horrible. I saved you. I saved everyone. I almost died getting to you all. And Sis's terror morphed to rage. They didn't care. She tensed her shoulders and fists.
That's all this is. That's all we're here for. Every irken for themselves. But I cared. I cared about what happened to the tallest. But they cared about their snacks, not their heroes. I was supposed to be a hero! Now something's wrong with me. I can't think straight. I can't remember.
She circled back to confusion. Why do I feel I lost something important? Something was torn away from me.
Your mind?
Raph suggested, not in mockery. Sis ignored him.
It made me sick. I could hardly focus on what I was doing to bring the ship out of the Florpus. What was it? What did I lose that was so important to me? What happened to me? What's wrong with me? I can't stand this. Why? Eric, why?
Raph recoiled from the yelling invader when she was yet again assaulted by her own pack. She had seemed to unintentionally set herself off again with her outburst. Her body levitated from the first surge, then nearly tumbled off of the table's surface.
No, please. Please, not again.
Sis's body coiled inward, with her arms over her head, like a frightened child.
No.
I think you have to calm down, Raph told her. Your emotions are the trigger. Your pack is too fragile for that now. Sis gasped and groaned in agony with every shock. Intense, unbridled despair upon her face, she reached out to her fellow irken.
Please, make it stop. Make it stop. How did you make it stop? I can't stand this.
She cried out once again as she was delivered another shock. She curled back up.
It hurts. God damn it. Please, I can't. Please, stop.
Sobs joined her whimpers. The sound of it, the sight of it, it was surreal. Sis was driven to tears. Her pain and confusion, her world was indescribable in this moment. As disturbed as Raph was to see her like this, he could not help the same cowardly, insensitive, yet natural thoughts circling in his head. Though, curiously enough, he also still felt for Sis, more than he felt for anyone in decades. It was strange to feel again. Raph and the control brain continued working to fix the tortured Invader, who lost consciousness yet again. When Raph was sure Sis wouldn't hear, he muttered, out loud this time, "Better you than me." Out loud, in a vague attempt to chase away the nagging feeling of commiseration. It didn't work. "Please tell me it's over." Sis's first words after a full day of getting her rough condition and enough control. Raph wiped his brow with the back of his hand. He responded almost as breathlessly as Sis. This was our best. As far as we're concerned, this is as fixed as you're going to be. Your pack is still sensitive. It may still shock you, but definitely not continuously. It's back to knowing when it truly needs to reboot. You are probably prone to pack attacks, though. Sis's head shakily turned to look up at Raph in question and concern. With that, Raph explained, "They're like heart attacks, except it's the pack that fails and shuts down. Don't feel bad if you forgot that too. They're kind of rare." Sis carefully sat up, still looking at him. "That's not what's been happening to you," Raph added. "Pack attacks don't happen like that. The pack just shuts down instantly, click, and stuns you. Then there's a 50-50 chance of it restarting before the life clock hits 10 minutes. It's uncomfortable but not exactly painful according to victims. And obviously, your trauma was something else entirely. How do you feel?" He put a hand on Sis's shoulder, but the wounded Irken solemnly turned away. "I feel dead. So, it's not over."
Unfortunately not.
Answered the control brain from above.
Your pack is corrupted. You're a defective.
"Don't you need a trial for that?" Raph curiously objected.
The definition varies.
The control brain said.
She is not a defective for having a criminal history.
Sis looked up pleadingly at the intelligent machine that helped her. "You've really done all you can do. Positively?"
For the moment.
The control brain said. "So there will be more later."
You are to remain here in the Massive before we allow you to go anywhere else. You are in the most convoluted condition we have ever had to get in control of. Until it can be confirmed that you are capable of continuing to live independently, daily tests will be run."
"Oh." Sis stared down, visibly perturbed.
You must brace yourself, Invader Sis.
The control brain warned gravely.
Your pack is so corrupted, in fact, that we may need to have its contents deleted, and the pack itself incinerated.
Raph's eyes widened at the control brain, then instinctively shifted to see Sis's reaction. She was clearly appalled, her mouth agape as she too stared wide-eyed at the control brain. Her arms were holding her up from the table, and they nearly collapsed with her last inch of hope. She stared, and Raph waited anxiously for her to lash out. Sis's jaw trembled before she clenched her teeth shut. Then she looked down at her hands and muttered in horror, "Fuck." Raph knew he should have been surprised by the curse, but he wasn't. He understood. He himself was dismayed by the news Sis had to painfully grasp. After more silence, Sis bitterly said more. She whispered before she raised her brittle voice. "So that's why I feel dead. I am dead. And for what? Something that was meaningful to me and not to any other soul." Raph glared in pity, then averted his gaze, drawing in a silent, deep breath. With her head still facing down, and with her voice still shaken, Sis asked, "Am I free to move about the Massive?" Unemotionally, the control brain replied,
"Permission granted."
The instant she heard and felt the two cables in her pack withdraw, Sis hurriedly moved off of the table and exited the room without another word. Raph watched her go. Another day passed before Raph found Sis again. He had been making his way to one of the Massive's many snack rooms, as the tallest liked to call them. He meant to refill the drink in his hand and purchase something from the vending machine next to the room's entrance. But the idea was nearly forgotten when he found Sis sulking with her head and half of her body over the table she was sitting at. She was alone in the room, and she seemed to prefer it that way. Raph spoke to get her attention.
Sis.
One of Sis's antennae flicked at the sound that had so harshly cut into the peace and quiet, her best comfort. She did not respond. All she wanted to hear was the soft, quiet sounds around her. The low droning of the Massive's engine, and the faint, soft buzz of the vending machine 10 feet behind her. At this point, Raph had completely given up denying that he was genuinely concerned. He tried not to stare at the veins nastily popping out of the back of Sis's head, or the 2 wires hooked from there to the center of her pack.
Sis, I asked around. The navigators told me what happened to you. They told me you really are the reason we're not dead.
This time, Sis's only response was a slight shift of her head. She shut her eyes that were magenta just 2 days ago. Raph could sense what she was thinking about. He brought it up out loud.
If you do die from this, at least know that what you did wasn't already forgotten. It's not true. I'll remember. The navigators will remember too, but the tallest won't.
Sis said, her voice raspy and full of loathing. Raph pursed his lips, unsure of what to say next.
And maybe I'll end up forgetting too.
Sis continued, now with a hint of depression in her tone.
Maybe my pack is still eating up everything I ever knew, slowly.
Raph kept quiet, having the sense that Sis wasn't done speaking her mind. With that being correct, Sis said, this time with calm curiosity,
I still remember things, but it's strange. I remember training, but everything else about it is blank. I remember the action, and Almighty Tallest Miyuki looking down upon us, observing our progress. But I can't remember what the actions were exactly. I can't remember if we ran or flew ships. We did both of those,
Raph said.
You say me and you were partnered for most of these events?
Sis asked. She still lay over the table. Raph shrugged with a faint smile.
Yes. I was annoying then. I kept trying to stir up the action. I challenged you all the time. We were enemies? No, it was banter. You didn't always like it, though. I also behaved like that to grab Miyuki's attention. I wish I could remember. If I'm going to lose my life, I want to die remembering it. All of it.
Raph furrowed his brow with pity again.
It's uncanny, Sis, hearing this from you.
Sis turned her head to him halfway, though not far enough to meet his eyes.
Pardon? You were always so determined and strong,
Raph said.
That's what made you fly after us. But did the Florpus really take that strength away from you?
Sis once again chose to not respond.
You're not dead yet, Sis,
Raph said, sternly though calmly.
Yes, I am, Sis said, sternly though not calmly. But you're not. There's no harm in pretending I am. I will be soon. I should prepare myself.
Raph pulled his head back to stretch his neck, and he scratched it with his free hand. He sighed deeply during and after his stretch, then began pacing.
Sis, when I dropped out of the academy and gave up being an invader, you weren't happy to see me go like I thought. You insisted that I shouldn't give up on what I wanted to be, because it was important to me. But it stopped being important to me. Now it's the other way around, except this is your life we're talking about. The control brain only warned you that you may die. May! There's a chance you'll live. Can you give that chance a chance? That's what you said. Give your chances a chance.
Sis shifted again, but more abruptly this time, as if in interest or alarm. Raph couldn't tell. It was until a light spark occurred from Sis's pack that Raph assumed that she was about to malfunction again. "I remember that," Sis said in awe. Raph blinked and let his guard back down. "What?" Sis finally brought herself up and turned to face her former comrade, one elbow still on the table. "I did tell you that. It looks like you didn't listen." "But you're stronger than me," Raph said. "So you can listen to me, can't you?" Sis broke eye contact and glared in anguish. She shut her eyes as she answered. Yes, Raph, I'll try." "Thank you for what you did," Raph offered. Sis looked at him again with sincerity. "And thank you for..." She blinked, realizing she had neglected to show her gratitude before. She brought a hand to the new metal cast around her chest, made to shield her from most of the pain of her pack's occasional quirks. "This must have been extremely difficult. I need to be grateful too, don't I?" "First, I'd like to see you be yourself again," Raph said. Sis glared again, then shook her head. As she turned to lay back down over the table, she said sadly and wearily, "I'm sorry, Raph. I don't think that's going to happen. I'll be as strong as I can, but I'm just too tired." Understanding, Raph refilled his drink, skipped the snack machine, and let Sis have the room to herself. Just when he was out of sight but not in tennis shot, he said dismally, "See you later, princess." A nickname Raph used frequently for Sis throughout the days he had just reminisced about. That annoying detail too found its way back to Sis's memory as her pack made another tiny spit. The resurrected memory did not bother her. Instead, she was thankful that it existed to her again.